The 2008 financial crisis and successive tax scandals acted like a wake-up call. Globalisation had brought many benefits to the world, but people and governments realised that it had also facilitated tax evasion and avoidance, resulting in a strong sense of unfairness. Bank secrecy and lack of transparency helped high-net-worth individuals hide their assets offshore. Loopholes in the international tax rules also allowed multinationals to artificially, yet legally, shift their profits to low or no tax jurisdictions. Governments had to take action. International cooperation was vital to introduce some form of tax regulation to globalization. Through the G20 and OECD, countries worked together to build robust international standards, organize tax cooperation, and to restore trust in the tax system, leading to one of the great success stories in inclusive multilateralism.
People were concerned about the loss of revenue, particularly during a financial crisis, and yet the loss of revenue from tax avoidance and tax evasion was taking money away from the exchequers and the finance ministries. The most controversial issue at the G20 was this issue of tax. We had to compromise, and the compromise was that the G20 would ask the OECD to take action, and that began the 10 years of work on greater transparency.
The Global Forum on Transparency and Exchange of Information for Tax Purposes was established to step up the fight against offshore tax evasion. Through the implementation of global tax transparency standards, 84 million overseas bank accounts have been exposed, worth 10 trillion euros. With more than 100 billion euros in additional tax revenues identified so far, this system of multilateral exchange is a game changer. While significant progress was being made on ending bank secrecy, governments were losing billions per year to tax avoidance by multinational companies. OECD and G20 countries came together once again and jointly developed a package of 15 measures to tackle BEPS. Through the inclusive framework on BEPS, over 135 countries and jurisdictions are working together on equal footing on the implementation of these measures to ensure multinationals are paying their fair share of taxes wherever they do business. The results so far have been impressive, with many tax avoidance mechanisms being neutralised and a multilateral convention paving the way to closing loopholes in thousands of tax treaties worldwide. To support the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and in particular domestic resource mobilisation, the OECD and UNDP launched Tax Inspectors Without Borders, an innovative tool which brings a hands-on approach to respond to the needs of developing countries, transfer knowledge and skills, and help create a culture where everyone pays their fair share of taxes.
Clearly, official development assistance will at some point decline and maybe end. We have to be able to raise the revenue ourselves. We are quite sure that Tax Inspectors Without Borders will be able to help our revenue authority to be more efficient in managing our tax system and to reform it appropriately to ensure a greater level of revenue to support our development.
In spite of the progress to date on international cooperation on tax to regulate globalization, the job is not yet done. Today, the pressing issue is to address the tax challenges arising from digitalization. Enhancing the standards on nexus, profit allocation, and minimum taxes to effectively address the challenges of the digital era. Significant work has already been achieved so far, with the aim to deliver a consensus-based solution by mid-2021.
It is clear that new rules are urgently needed to ensure fairness and equity in our tax systems and to adapt the international tax architecture to new and changing business models. Without a global, consensus-based solution, the risk of further uncoordinated unilateral measures and retaliatory trade sanctions is real and growing by the day. It is imperative that the OECD's inclusive framework take this work across the finish line. Failure would risk tax wars turning into trade wars at a time when the global economy is already suffering enormously due to COVID-19.
The OECD and its bodies have demonstrated a unique ability to bring countries across the globe together to solve some of the most complex challenges of our time. As the COVID-19 pandemic continues its course, governments have had to fundamentally rethink tax policy and administration. We have provided immediate responses to countries to tackle the effects of the coronavirus, developed new standards for the effective collection of cross-border tax, expanded our internationally comparable tax revenue data, and continued to support governments on the path to decarbonisation. Going forward, we must pursue this inclusive journey towards greater tax regulation of globalisation, take action towards a greener recovery, and work together to provide long-term certainty to our tax systems by reaching an international agreement on digital.